Thank you. I got to get Patty, that was great. Thank you. I got to tell you that I may be dabbing at my eyes during the course of our catechesis. I'm a man. We don't cry. This is not emotion. It's a disease. Anybody here got dry eye syndrome? Ha! Okay, sometimes you get tears you didn't ask for. So that's just to let you know that I'm not being moved by anything I say. Boy, are we on the same page, Patty. I guess we might have the same God. What do you think about that? Yeah, I feel like we're just moving. Yeah. And catechesis is a spiritual piece too. If it isn't catechesis. So this is a continuation of Patty's spiritual piece. And we really are on the same page. And we shouldn't be surprised at that. The definition that Patty gave for mysticism is great. And the wonderful thing that St. Teresa of Lisieux taught us was that it's indescribably delicious. So living the interior journey is not something describable. So I want you to know that I am a failure from the outset. I'm not going to get this job done. We're going to talk about some things that I'm learning, but it's not going to tell you much because the interior journey is truly indescribably delicious. And I don't know if you know this or not, but St. Teresa of Lisieux was also neurotic and is indeed, well, most people who experience some form of mysticism are regarded as a little neurotic anyway, because they're not well understood. But she actually suffered from depression. And part of that might have been the difficulty and the pain that she experienced in having something so great that it was indescribable, and yet living in a situation where she was expected to describe it. And that's why we love and honor her to this day, and why she's a great patroness for this journey that we're on. Father Richard Rohr, among Catholic authors, is probably one who has written about as much as you're going to find on the mystical journey. He's extremely and brutally frank about what he feels and believes, and so it's not always popular in every Catholic circle. But what he has to say about the interior journey is pretty powerful, I think. And this is what he says about mysticism. First of all, he warns everybody who's reading his book, don't let the word mystic scare you. Because I, all my life, have been afraid of being a mystic. Not that I ever thought I would, because it was for somebody else. I knew that. But the fact of the matter is, it's a possibility for anybody. And so, it's nothing to be afraid of. But this is what he says, do not let the word mystic scare you off. It simply means one who has moved from mere belief systems or belonging systems to actual inner experience. All spiritual traditions agree that such a movement is possible, desirable, and available to anyone. So if we can take that and begin to work from that, then perhaps we won't get so nervous about this whole morning. But rather we can relax and begin to look into our own lives and just thank God that we're here to talk to each other about it. Anybody here had an aha experience of God in their life? Anybody? A really aha spirit experience. Did you tell anybody about it? Good. Most of us are afraid too, because we think that if we tell somebody about the aha experience in our lives, that they'll think we're crazy. We have a fear that nobody will understand. And why is that? Because aha moments with God are indescribably delicious. And so we have to not be afraid to be able to share that with each other. That's why this kind of conversation this morning is awesome. And that's why if we're involved in the mission of the church to transform the culture in which we live, we have to gain a better understanding of where transformation comes from. The transformation is not a diocesan plan. That is not where transformation comes from. The transformation of the human heart is a divine plan and is achievable. And it occurs by contagion, so that hearts being transformed are transformed by other hearts that are being transformed. It's contagious. It isn't something we can just teach. It's something we can only be. So it's authentic. So it shouldn't be a danger or a scareful thing to anybody. It's simply authentic. What does Richard Rohr mean by beyond belief systems? Well, belief systems very often are described as the intellectual assent to a group of teachings that a community holds dear to itself. Wouldn't we say that's very often what we think belief is for us as, let's say, Roman Catholics? We have a belief system that we call the Roman Catholic system of believing. And we adhere to what we call the magisterium, or the teaching authority of the church, in our lives. And we do, so that we are called to be, in a sense, submissive to the mission of the church, given to the church by Jesus, the incarnate presence of God in our lives and in our world. So we are submissive to the church's teaching authority. We call that the magisterium. That's a belief system. Now, Richard Rohr says that the transformational interior journey goes beyond that. So it doesn't mean that's wrong at all. It doesn't mean that that's to be irritating and bugging us. It doesn't mean that it's so limiting that it impedes our true freedom. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that's not all there is. God is bigger than any system of belief. Any system. I'm a bishop. An official teacher of the church. You used to have to believe me. Whether you did or not, you were supposed to. I'm here to say it's not enough. It's not enough. So that's what he means by the mystical journey is a journey that takes us beyond belief systems and beyond systems of belonging. The human experience is that we are not by nature isolates, that we are created to be together. As a matter of fact, it's a very important part of our spiritual experience in our lives that we look the most like God when we're together. So that together experience is extremely important. And that can be called belonging. In a sense, there's an ownership of one another in the belonging experience of community. And so there are systems of belonging as well as there are systems of belief, and they interchange. So that we begin to distinguish one person or one group from another by their systems of belief. And we move into an intellectual place in our lives, where most of us live, by the way, in our head, where we spend most of our time deciding who belongs and who doesn't, who's right and who's wrong. That's very much what our life, in our culture, perhaps more than any other, is about. And it's very much in our heads. I want to go back to what Patty said about childhood and the natural experience every human being has. We really are born what we used to call in philosophy a tabula rasa. We are born a blank tablet on which life can write. So that every experience of life begins to fill in the space of this blank tablet so that it can be filled and is no longer blank. And we like that idea because empty scares us to death. So we don't want any empty time in our day or empty space in our lives. So we fill it up with furniture and things to do. All our space gets filled. We don't like emptiness. Okay, all of that has to do with mind. When we are born into this life, we are that little tabula rasa on which can be written the experience of life. So we start out with a kind of a awe and wonder for which we pray at confirmation as one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Awe and wonder in God's presence. We pray for it, but we really don't want it. We really are afraid the kids might get it. Awe and wonder in God's presence. And that's the way we start. So it's all just wide open eyes and mouths, isn't it? That baby looking up at its mother is just like this, okay? Taking it all in. And it's not processing it very well here. It's going into here right away. So that it stays open. But what happens? Mom and Dad have been given a job. When you have a baby, your job is to keep the baby safe so that the baby can grow and be its own person and eventually become separate from you and begin its own life and continue this race of ours. So what we do to keep ourselves safe, keep our children safe, is we begin to tell them what is dangerous in life. So they learn in little ways what is dangerous. One of the first dangers they learn is if they mess up, there are consequences. So that there is a little bit of fear that enters into this wide open, wide-eyed life that is, you might say, all heart and no head. And this wide open life is eventually learning that there are do's and don'ts and that there are dangers in life. And the head begins to work because the mind is a gift from God that is given to us to keep us safe. To keep us safe from all kinds of things, to keep us safe from tigers. So one of the things we learn is stay away from tigers. You know, Mom and Dad tell you don't ride your bike down the yellow line. They say don't run in the street. Don't run with scissors, etc., etc. Those things are intended to keep us safe. So that's a gift. It's okay. That's the way, it's a survival gift, isn't it? The mind really is a survival gift, isn't it? It keeps us safe. It's also intended to keep us safe from error in our lives. And so we learn very early on that there is a learning experience and that the mind can take in the various realities around us and can begin to process them. And so as we use our mind, we struggle to keep ourselves safe from error. We struggle to be right. Okay. All of that is to say that the human journey, the mystical journey, is a journey that is willing to be open to what is without processing it out of existence. Because you and I have learned over time, out of our fear of being wrong, to process everything. So very often you revisit your experiences because you want to process them some more. Make sure you got it right. We're constantly doing that. We're constantly revisiting our lives. We did it a little bit this morning, except you were revisiting your childhood, hopefully, and discovering that that was kind of fun without processing. You might say that much of our life is spent in accomplishing these things which the mind helps us do. So, and that's not bad because the mind is a gift. It's just not enough. Richard Rohr teaches that there are two halves of the spiritual life. And he says the first half is of great value and in fact is of necessity. That is, the don'ts and the do's have value. The rights and the wrongs and the ability to judge have value. It helps us to survive so that maybe we can enter the second half of our life. If you don't learn the first half well, you don't make it to the second half. You're dead. So we learn things like how to get along at home, how to win the favor of our parents, how to keep our peers from beating us up. We learn as we go to school how to be popular or not. We learn the consequences to our behavior. We look at each other and find out whether we're liked or not. We constantly are building up the ability to get along, to belong, and be welcomed, and be in the in group. We learn constantly how to fit in. And that becomes the process of our life, constantly observing. And so we learn what it is to belong at home. And then gradually, you who have raised kids, you find out that we come into a process where nature begins to form us in getting out of that home, to head on a journey. To head on a journey away from our family that established us through this much of our life, and to begin to prepare to be a family of our own. So the first half of life is all about learning how to belong and get along at home, learning how to move out of home and to get on our own. Sometimes that takes some folks longer than others. And eventually to be a home, to establish a home of our own. And in order to do that, we struggle through life to be right, to be accepted, to be popular, to be successful, and to make it. So we spend the first half of our life doing all those things. In order to belong to a faith community, we learn the same things. There are things my faith community teaches that other faith communities don't. There are behaviors that my faith community practices that other faith communities don't. And I learn what it is to belong there. Those are the systems of belonging. Those are the first half of life systems that help us to get to the second half of life. So it's very important for us to understand that we should love the first half of our life. We don't reject it. So what I'm going to say from now on, and I'm sure what Patty was saying, although I won't speak for her, but what I'm going to say from now on is really about moving into the second half of life journey, which many of us are already on. We maybe didn't know it. But the second half of life journey is a movement from the head that keeps us safe to the heart that opens us to hope. Now, there's a combination of that going on in our lives all the time. We're always a combination of that as we move along. But sometimes we get stuck. I would say often we get stuck on the first half of life, being accepted, popular, belonging, and successful. And that we're not able to get into the second half of life because we're preoccupied with the first half stuff. So it's not unusual that people don't easily move into this interior journey, which was begun but often gets stuck with the first half stuff. But mysticism simply says there's a point in life when we move beyond that. We don't reject, we move beyond. We recognize that this interior journey with God in our lives goes beyond church and society and those things that really get us to this point where we're free enough to move on. So we don't reject, we just move on. We go deeper. And we find other realities that are true. And that stuff moves us into our heart. I'm using the word heart because I don't know what else to use. You know, soul, I could say soul. Philosophically, that's probably better because heart sounds like a pump. But the fact of the matter is the pump is kind of at the center and is pretty important to staying alive. And so people who speak about our prayer that speaks about heart, our devotion that speaks about the Sacred Heart, and all that we've learned about the heart kind of fits what I'm talking about. So it's not just the pump, it's also the core. By the way, core comes from the word heart. So it's the core of us. Core corpus. Core cordis, sorry. So it comes from heart. So the heart is that wonderful part of us where the loving more than the understanding takes place. Where the risk more than the safety takes place. Where the surrender more than control takes place. Where the relationship more than the distinction takes place. And where difference does not have to be eliminated but harmonized. Now, that goes very much against what a lot of us experience as we go through life and as we try and live in this world. We constantly live by distinctions that make us feel safe and sure. So I don't know about you, how much dialogue you've been in with people of other Christian faiths. I don't know how threatened you have felt when they attacked what you believe, or at least questioned it and challenged you. I don't know how often you might have felt like, geez, I wonder if I'm wrong, and they're right. All of that is a possibility. When we go to the heart, we don't get stuck here, and we allow what is to be. And we learn to let go of control and to stay with what is. We begin to embrace, as St. Teresa tells us, the now, the present. Why? Because the past and the future are all about my being in control. And the now is about my surrendering. We want to control everything. Anybody here a control freak? Well, you know it, don't you? Don't you know it? Yeah, and those who don't have their hands up, they're just trying to control it. Now, we want control. So what do? We live in the past and the future. How much do you live in the past and the future? How many of you are thinking about after we get through here right now? We live in the past and the future because that's a control issue. We try to control the past with our guilt and regret. We try to control the future with our worry and planning. I want to be an anti-planner. But plans are only just so good. You know? Heart attacks change all kinds of plans. Enron changed a few plans. So plan's fine, it's part of our human experience, but in the end, it isn't enough. It isn't enough. Control isn't the answer. Mystics, sometimes Christian mystics particularly, are accused in the sense of being kind of New Age type folks. You have to watch out for that sort of thing. That are you New Age? I've been asked this. Are you kind of New Age? You talk about New Age? Well, here's the distinction. New Age is about manipulating the higher whatever. And Christian mysticism is about surrendering to the higher. The one seeks to control, the other seeks to surrender. Teresa's talking about surrender. She's not talking about how much she can control. Did you ever hear anybody say this? If you had prayed with a deeper faith, you would have had that cure. You ever hear that one? So what's that prayer? That's just a subtle manipulation of God. Because what is the consequence of that kind of thinking? If you do it right, He has to operate. He has to respond. If you get it right, He has to do it. It's control. That is not prayer. Prayer is, dear God, I can't, would you mind? That's what prayer is. It starts with I can't. It takes the control issue out. The interior journey in the second half of life is about learning what it is to surrender. That's our life. Our life is the journey towards surrender, where we no longer, in our time with God, are busy speaking so that He will be sure to get it. And we become more those who listen so that we are sure to get it. From speaking to listening, meditation, your contemplation, journaling, the effort to listen. If, as we say, prayer is a conversation, conversation is a two-way street. If it isn't, it's a monologue. If it's conversation, you're as busy or busier listening than you are speaking. How does one listen for God? One listens for God by staying now, not up in the future, where we control it with our worry, or in the past, where we manage it with our guilt. Neither one of those exists. Did that ever occur to you? The future doesn't exist. I guess it will, but it doesn't. The past doesn't exist. It's gone. All you got is now. So quit worrying about lunch.
Actually, you know what I was going to do?
What are we going to do?
You were talking about furniture.
Yeah.
I was going to go home and refinish a piece of furniture.
Cool. That fills up your space, but it doesn't change the space in your house. That's pretty good. You're half right.
I wasn't even going to come. I was like, well, the family's gone. I
Yeah.
can do this.
That is so cool. Now what? That's a miracle.
Everything's
It's a
holy
miracle,
now.
isn't it?
Everything's holy now.
That's a miracle. Your life will never be the change now. The furniture will be different, but so will you. Control and submission. Okay. What time do I end, Ryan?
When you're finished, Bishop.
Yeah.
You better start worrying about lunch. Okay. Let me just say, how did I get on this kick? Because 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been talking this way. So how did I get on this kick? Well, I in reflecting on my life, it's really been about control and surrender, as I try to summarize it. I'm 80 years old, so I've got a lot of summarizing to do here. But when I try to summarize it, it really is kind of like that control-surrender thing. When I was in the seminary, maybe the first time I got in touch with that importance of that was I think I was in third theology in the seminary, which means I was maybe 2 years from ordination. And we were taking theology, and we'd been through philosophy, and we were into sacramental theology, and I was reflecting on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And I got into trouble. I couldn't figure that out. I went to my philosophy, and I looked at Aristotle's hylomorphic theory that Thomas Aquinas used to help explain how the Eucharist is possible, and that didn't help. And I studied more, and I went to the books more, because they were going to help me not only understand myself, but explain to you how Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. And I was in a morass of doubt. And I recall one kind of sunny afternoon, we had some free time, and I went out. I was really disturbed. I went out and I sat in a little grotto that we had to the Blessed Mother near the seminary. I went out and sat there with this big book on metaphysics by my side. And the metaphysics and I sat there in front of the Blessed Mother, and we doubted together. And I had come to kind of a back-mind conclusion that I shouldn't be a priest if I couldn't believe in what they do. That was a crisis. And I sat there, and I didn't know where to go with that. And within me, and don't ask me, well, you can ask me how. Within me became the awareness that that's not why I was going to be a priest anyway, so that I could explain everything, although we were being trained that way. Priests were supposed to have the answers to everything. That's how I got in the mess. I was being trained to get into here. And here, surrender. I said, I can't explain this, but I don't have to quit being a priest because I can't explain it. I surrender to the mystery. If you're going to be a Catholic, you better learn to do that. Because people are going to ask you time and time again, well, why do you Catholics believe that? My favorite answer to that is it's a mystery. One time the deacons of our diocese had me come up to their retreat, and we spent an evening. The bishop was going to answer their questions. And the guys got into it because they were all studying, and they got into it, wanting answers, and I would end up saying, well, it's a mystery. They would laugh at me, and it became a joke. And I had a party for them at Christmas after their retreat. And they didn't come to the house on time. And time went by, and I wondered, what the heck? Somebody gets here usually by now. And the doorbell rang, and they were all there, all at once. They had parked elsewhere and snuck up the street. And every one of them had a T-shirt on that said, "We love our bishop, it's a mystery." So I got a T-shirt that says, "I love my deacons, God knows why." If you're going to be a Catholic, you better learn to surrender to the mystery, because you're not going to explain stuff. Get out of here. You can't stay here and be a Catholic. You've got to go here to be a Catholic at the core. Okay. For me, that was my first lesson, but you'd think I'd learned something from that. And I was going along pretty good, and I became a bishop. I mean, how cool is that? And I think it was about 1983. I've always loved retreats, and I was on an 8-day directed retreat with bishops of Region 9 in Louisiana. We were making our retreat, and one morning, all by ourselves, totally silent for 8 days, and I was sitting at the breakfast table, and I was beginning to feel angry. And my anger was rising, and it was purely feeling. I couldn't get to it here at all. And that perdured during the day, and I went to my spiritual director on the retreat, and I said, I am really feeling angry. And he said, don't leave that. Stay with that feeling. Don't try to run away from it. And I would walk and walk. I was getting backaches. Took the mattress off the bed and put it on the floor. And I went 8 days. And during the course of the 8 days, I got in touch with something, and that was, I was trained in psychology as a young priest so that I could counsel the kids in the high school. But I counseled a lot of people over the course of the years as a priest, and even as a bishop I continued to do that. And over the course of that time, I was taking in so much pain. It was evident to me that life is unfair. I couldn't get over how unfair it was, the people that were hurting, who didn't deserve that. And I got into this thing about how can there be a loving God who lets that happen? Now that's the classic dowdy faith. That's the classic dowdy faith. Don't feel bad if you're joining me on that one. It's a classic dowdy faith. I'm convinced that most atheists really are saying, life is so bad, I'd rather have no God than a God that lets that go on. Kind of a classic response. Because I was trying to settle the ultimate argument of good and evil. I mean, here I was, as a bishop, struggling with the same thing the human race has struggled with from day one. If you believe in God, you've got a problem. And history shows endless efforts to settle the problem. You can't do it. I went for 7 years with this thing in the back of my head. I don't know how to relate to you, God. You didn't know it. I was pretty good. You didn't know it. I was on a retreat. It was 7 years later. I was on a retreat at Sedalia. And I was sitting there and reading my breviary. And reading my breviary was like this. I would open the book, start the Psalms, and settle all the things that had to be done that day. Or win the arguments that I hadn't won yet. And that's what my prayer was like, because reading the breviary was kind of routine. Don't ask me how, I know how.
But I'm reading Psalm 73 on this particular day, 7 years later, and this is what I hear. But as for me, I lost my balance, my feet all but slipped. Since my heart was embittered and my soul deeply wounded, I was stupid and could not understand. I was like a brute beast in your presence. Yet I am always with you. You take hold of my right hand. With your counsel, you guide me, and at the end, receive me with honor. What else have I in heaven? None beside you delights me on earth. Though my flesh and my heart fail, God is the rock of my heart, my portion forever. And I saw that, and I said, that's me. Where have I been for 7 years? I surrendered. I haven't settled the mystery of good and evil. Why, an all-good God lets that be so unfair? The only answer is to surrender, but that's a thing of the heart. The mind will never get you there. It will always keep you tumbling around with the mystery. The mind hates mystery. And so I look through my life and I think, how did I get to this point? I've been really graced with some time with some really great people. We need to visit. With some really great people who are on the journey. And we have a little group. I'm going to give some brochures out for you to look at. Those who, I don't have enough for everybody, but I've got some who are really interested. We have a little group called One Simple Voice, which is kind of a neat way to talk about the two-way conversation with God. One simple voice, listening. And we help folks to kind of get on track with that who are opening their lives, God's opening their lives to the second half of life where you go to your heart and where you begin to live there. And it is my hope and my prayer that the church will find her way too, more deeply into her heart. We teach with great clarity. And we profess to be present, as Jesus was, to those who don't get it. And to those who sin. We stand as the church of forgiveness and healing. We preach that. Do our people feel it? Do they feel that closeness, forgiveness, and understanding from their church? Are we spending enough time as our church helping people to feel our presence as church? What's the change in the culture your life may bring about if you're willing to enter the journey of the interior life yourself? What will people get from you? The right answers? Or will they get the sense from you of compassion and presence and hope? That doesn't come from here. That comes from here. We've got to go there. This is one of the toughest journeys in the world to make. But it's the second half of life journey. And I see a lot of second half of life people here. The first half of life people are still very, very busy. So it's okay. They're doing what they have to do. But if we have the gift of space in our lives now, then it's time for us to move into that area, that place of our heart, where we ourselves can find God. Interestingly enough, to know God in the biblical sense is to make love to God. One of the best spiritual books on the mystical life ever written is The Cloud of the Unknowing.
Mm-hmm. Would you repeat that?
The Cloud of the Unknowing. You won't enjoy it.
It's a mystery.
That's what The Cloud of the Unknowing about. You cannot penetrate God from here. But God can penetrate you here. That's the whole point, you know. That's what we're getting at when we talk about the mystical journeys. No more complicated than that. It's letting God make love to you. Go back and look at the Bible, particularly the Hebrew Scriptures, and watch and see how often this is what is said. He went in and knew his wife, and she conceived. The biblical understanding of knowing is to make love and bring new life. That's the biblical concept. God wants to make love to you. That could be scary. Because you can't control that. You can only let it. You are the beloved. You're the beloved. Can you be loved? You let it happen. That's the journey. So that's really the struggle that we talk about. This is what this will sum up my life. I'm closer to stopping running now than I have been in the past. Oh God, I'm 80 years old. I better quit running pretty soon. Did you ever read Francis Thompson's poem, The Hound of Heaven? Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my favorite metaphors, and metaphors are big on the journey. You know, metaphors are where we see natural things that become wondrous. What's that song? Yeah, things become wondrous that were just ordinary before. Those are metaphors for the deeper reality. Well, one of my metaphors is dogs. The night I got the sense in my heart that I should be a priest, there were dogs barking all over the neighborhood. And that's stuck with me ever since, the rest of my life. So dogs are kind of a big deal for me. That's why the Hound of Heaven makes so much sense. This might be your life, but this is how Francis Thompson, who was a drug addict and was found in the gutter by an English couple who took him in and kept him alive. This is how he describes his life, mine, possibly yours. I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind. And in the midst of tears, I hid from him and under running laughter. I pleaded outlaw-wise by many a hearted casement curtained red, trellised with intertwining charities. For though I knew his love who followed, yet I was sore adread, lest having him I should have naught beside. Fear was not to evade, as fear was to pursue. Nigh and nigh draws the chase, with unperturbed pace, deliberate speed, majestic instancy, and past those noised feet, a voice comes yet more fleet. Lo, naught contentst thee, who contentst not me. God says, ah, fondest, blindest, weakest, I'm he whom thou seekest. Thou drivest love from thee, who drivest me. Don't drivest him. End of story. Thank you.